So we are in a series called Family Dynamics, and every family has dynamics. Some are good. Some are not so good. What's weird is we use the word dynamic to describe someone, charismatic or really, I don't know, what's a word for it? A dynamic.
Charismatic feels like it suits well.
Yeah. But I mean, even like when you're thinking about like ground effects on a car or whatever, you say it's really dynamic. My husband got a new television recently because we've been moving, and it says HDR, and then it said high dynamic. And I always thought it was high definition. And he goes, well, the older TVs were high definition. This one's high dynamic, and it has more to do with the color contrast. It almost hurts your eyes. It is so clear. And so dynamic means contrast. It means varying differences, ups and downs, and interest. But the things that really draw you into relationship, even when you're first dating or whatever, can be what really gets on your nerves.
Yeah.
Those dynamics can end up being something that rubs you the wrong way. Yeah. But every family has its dynamics. Every family has its function and dysfunction. But our greatest call is to emulate the family of God, right?
Yeah.
Each family should represent the relationships that restore, relationships that heal. And Ryan, in your message about family dynamics, you're talking about that we should want to look like Jesus. And there are times that we don't look like Jesus. And this question said, when others observe me, do they see Jesus? That would be hard to answer for yourself. You can't grade your own paper, right? Somebody else has to tell you, you look like Jesus right now. You don't look like Jesus. And I mean, there's times when I got really angry as a mom, when people aren't washing their dishes or whatever. And I could be like, yeah, I look like Jesus when he was turning the tables over in the temple. I look like him then, but do I look like him when he says forgive, 70 times 7? So I guess it really takes relationship to know whether or not you look like Jesus.
Yeah, I think part of why I love this series is it's giving people an opportunity to look at their family dynamic and look at the vision that they're trying to strive for with their family, and really wrestling that to the ground to say, Lord, is this the direction that we're really supposed to be going as a family? And so when I started this series, I was thinking about the first 5 books of the Bible were given to God's people that were coming out of slavery. I heard one scholar describe Leviticus and Deuteronomy as the New World Order. These are people that have no idea how to treat one another. And so he gives the law to say, hey, this is how the world should be ordered, and this is how you should treat one another, because the society before that was absolutely barbaric, and they lost their way. And so one of the lines that I love about one of the messages that I give is, does your family need a new world order? Do you need something new? And so this message is all about unpacking what does a biblical picture look like of what our family should be striving for. Because when you get married and sometimes remarried and you're bringing in multiple family dynamics, you can lose your way. And you can go, what is it that we're even trying to accomplish, and what is the mission and vision God's given us?
I think that question, Pastor Amie, evaluating, do you look like Jesus? And I think it's important to have people in your life that can really help you evaluate that you can be honest with and truthful with. And I think for me, it's my spouse, and she knows that and always is correcting, and just like, not correcting, but really just readjusting. Hey, why did you do this way? Or, so I think it's important for all of us to have those relationships to see, am I emulating what I'm supposed to with Christ? Am I actually following Christ's way and loving people and doing what I should?
Because there's no compliment like a genuine one from your inner circle.
Right.
Because that's really how I kind of choose new friends and relationships, is if their inner circle legit stamps their character, then I'm like, okay, then they really are who they say they are. Because oftentimes we are the least like Jesus with our inner circle. with our family, because you want to let your hair down. You want to be able to vent. You want to say whatever you want to say. You're not worried about what people think. When in actuality, intimate relationships, that's where multiplication takes place. You can't have multiplication without intimacy. So if you're going to multiply the purpose and plan God's given you in the call, you should start with the people that are close to you, right? And so that's our family. So we should live more intentionally and more on purpose with the people God has assigned us to in our family, and not think, let your hair down, just be whatever you want to be, act however you want to act. Of course, you want to be able to be authentic, but I think we also have to remember, I'm not supposed to just act like however I want to act in front of my children or in front of my spouse. There is a standard given by God for how I treat the people that God's given me.
Yeah, I think that's so important, even like having kids, making sure that we're living that example with our spouse and with others, because, we're emulating how they should be treating others as well. So I think, your family is the first one that'll humble you the quickest. Because it's like, we have these different roles and whatever your job may be, you're a big CEO of a company, but when you leave your underwear on the floor, your wife say, "Hey, big man, you need to pick up your underwear and put them in the hamper." Right.
Yeah.
So they do hold us accountable. But for us as a spouse and a husband and a wife, like for us to emulate that for our kiddos of those relationships and how they should be.
There's a quote that really made its rounds in the church world a couple of years ago about how God, it was in reference to Jacob pretending he was Esau and asking for God's blessing. And the statement was, God can't bless who you pretend to be, only who you really are. So if you're asking in the name of something you pretend to be, that's not where he is. He's where you really are, right? Yeah. Well, it's the same with your family, is you can say God is first in your life, but your kids, they don't emulate and they aren't multiplied by what you say is first. They actually emulate what is first in your life. So whatever it is that you're pretending, and you've seen that for years, Josh, in youth ministry. You're a youth pastor for years, and we've seen it in family ministry where parents will say one thing, God's first and all that, but really sports are first. And the kids know that. Or the kids are first. I remember my grandmother giving me that advice years ago and saying, Amy, do not stop your whole life when you have a baby. Because you send the message to them and the whole family, everything revolves around this child. So then when it's sports instead of church, it's not about the institution. It's about what is the family call that we have and how are we helping one another fulfill the call that God's put on our lives.
Yeah. I remember as a teenager, I went to a big football school and summer practice started the same day that our church mission trip was. And so I told my mom, I'm not going to be able to go to the mission trip because I've got practice. And she said, no, buddy, that's not how it works for our house. You're going to have to tell them that you're not going to summer football practice. You're going to miss a week and you're going to come back. And then you also need to let them know, hey, on Wednesdays, you're going to have to leave early because we've got church too. And so you're going to have to go up to the coach. And I remember walking up to the coach and he was flabbergasted. Like he had never heard anybody in his whole life, come against the God of sport. Especially football in Texas. And I had a great time on the mission trip and heard God and all that. And I came back and I went to my spot. I was supposed to be the starter or whatever. And I went to my spot and my coach pulled me over. He said, hey, that's not your spot anymore. You got to go all the way over to the C team. That's your spot right now because you have decided what was important to you. And I remember walking over like, did I just make a mistake? Like here I am trying to serve God. And people are coming against that decision. But
there's only one first.
Exactly. And I didn't make it to the NFL. I stopped growing. I never got any taller. Everybody else came in stronger.
But look what you're doing now.
But those memories served as formative, at such a formative time. I remember being able to hear God for myself, not just for my family. And really, it was only because my parents said, hey, this is what is first. first.
Right.
There's a lot of things that are going to be fun and great for you as you're developing, but this is home base for us as a home.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. It's easy, like you said, it's easy to say God is first, but to really live that out and put him first, you know, is sometimes hard. You know, sometimes for most of us, it's like a job comes in there. Not that we're trying to put our job before God or our family or anything, but really that's just, sometimes it just takes precedence of us just living that out. But I think it's so important to have relationships in our life that can reevaluate that and say, hey, you need to just reprioritize where you're at.
Well, there you talked about in the message about what's first in your life, and there is only one first. I mean, that's it. You can't have multiple aims, you know, and God should be first. But what does that look like in everyday life? We talk about with tithing. That's one way to put God first. At Covenant, we talk about with your time, talent, treasure. But, you know, a lot of people take offense at God asking Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, his son of promise. And like, why would you serve a God who would ask for a human sacrifice? And the context of that was that Abraham came from Ur, which was a place where all firstborns were sacrificed to idols. So God is asking him, will you give me what you really wanted that I gave you? Will you give it back to me? So he's requesting that, but they go to the mountain and he does everything he needs to do to sacrifice his son. And he's got even the knife in the air, and the angel stays his hand and stops. And God says, I don't need you to do this. I just needed to know that you are willing to do for me what you would do for a dead God, for a dead system. And so he was also showing him, I'm not the kind of God that's going to ask for blood sacrifice. That's where you came from, but I want to take you to the point to see, am I really first?
Yeah.
Am I first, or is what I've given you become first? And I think in all of our walk with God, all of our walks with God, we'll come to a place where it's a career that we have to lay on the altar, or it's a relationship that we have to lay on the altar. I mean, many of us at times have talked about how we would, even in dating or whatever, say, you know what, this is the direction I'm going. If you're not going there, then we're not meant for each other. But with parenting and family, it's really hard to separate because it's something God's given you. I think that's why the story of Isaac is so poignant, because it's so easy to put our children first. Instead of teaching them how to put God first.
I mean, as a pastor, you always want to say that God is first, but I think, you know, there's seasons like right now, if I'm being honest, I think sometimes that the job, like where we're at, like just coming to work and being here, it's not first, but sometimes when we're at work a lot or we stay late, your wife or your family feels like, man, you're putting work ahead of your family.
Yeah.
And that's never the case. It's never what we want, but usually that's kind of what happens in life with most men, right? I have just a desire to work hard. That's just part of who I am. I've always been like this, not workaholic type person that, you know, I just want to put my best foot forward. So I think sometimes that can take precedence, but it's never my heart or my intention. But I think there's those seasons, and that's where, you know, my wife Ashley comes in and says, hey, you're staying a little too long. You need to get home earlier. Your kids are realizing that you're not getting to show up for certain things because you're putting this first or whatever it may be. You know, we always wake up in the morning and have our devotional and have our time with God. And so we want to say that is first, but so often that can be put on the back burner sometimes on accident, you know, not on purpose.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So don't you think, though, that that's what's poignant, Ryan? Because if God is first, then he helps establish what order everything else should be in. And that changes based on right then where the seed needs to be planted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, life can get out of balance really fast. Mm-hmm. It doesn't take much. And if you put it in the context of our schedule, what we spend the most time with. Like, we would never look at our kid and go, you're putting school first because you went there for 6 hours today. It's just like, no, they went to school, you know? So it's like, hey, how do you put God first when you're at school? And how do you put God first when you're at work? These are very natural and practical things. I think for me, just like you, I can dive into work. I think I could work 16 hours a day and be just fine. Yeah. I could go into my office. I could get introverted really, really fast and go, how much could I possibly get done in a 24-hour period? And relationships suffer. And inevitably, I stop leading my home when I get in that mode. And so for me, I have to pull myself out of that. And my kids at 9 and 4, they'll knock on my door. They could care less about work. They'll interrupt speeches, Zooms. They could care less about y'all. They'll run in here right now. Like, hey, Dad, I need to talk to you about something. Yeah. And I used to, especially during COVID, I would get annoyed by disruptions, but I started seeing those as God interruptions.
That's good.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I used to be like, wait, what exactly are they interrupting? That is so important that they're not important, and that and even at young ages, teaching them about the Bible now, and them being at that age of being able to absorb that. And even just our family dinner conversations and making those more intentional versus it could be dinner management more than it is like having an intentional conversation with your family. And so those are things that we're even learning now with our young family. What about you, Josh?
No, it's beautiful. And I think that's why the tithe is so important, because it is a decision that we can make to say, I won't take everything. I love Job says, if I've taken more from the land than I should have. That's where and so all of these things, with career, with relationships, with anything that we can get caught up in, there is a tendency to give our all to that. Yeah. And I think the tithe is a really beautiful check to say, I don't have to take everything. Right. And if I'm living my life taking everything from every bucket, then it's not going to be healthy. Right. But I have made a decision that I can refrain. I can push back a little bit, and I can put some buffer between me and the end of it. And I think that helps in relationships. And I think that's really how we get to see who's God. Yeah. And so for us, like, we are getting ready to sell a house, and that is a check on me, because I have never written a tithe check that large, and it makes me sick and queasy. I'm like, my God, what if I could put it in a retirement account? What if it, what could this be? And it really is a check. I heard a story of Rockefeller, the richest man, one of the richest men in the history of the world. And he gets sick in his 40s, and he is raised Baptist and really has a moment with God. And he takes it back to when he was a child, and his first job, he made $1 or whatever. And he was telling his mom everything he's going to do with that $1. And his mom takes a dime of it and says, that's awesome, John. But the first tenth goes to God, and takes a dime of it to take to offering on Sunday morning. And he said, man, if I would have never tithed the dime, then I would have never tithed the $1. Or $100 or $1,000 or $10,000. And it just kept going up for him. But it really comes back to what is first. And that's why I think the tithe is a beautiful check for all of us to say, who's really first with the things that God has blessed you with. Yeah. And then you get the opportunity every time the tithe gets a little bigger to say, is this thing, has it become a God in my life, a relationship or a career or an investment or whatever that is, or do I still honor God with the first of what he's blessed me with?
Yeah. Because it's a practice of sacrifice. Yeah. And if you can't do it with money, you certainly can't do it with forgiveness. Yeah. You know, it's leaving that space and going, okay, I don't have to drill them against the wall to try to get answers about something. If I'm in an argument, I can leave that space and allow God to use it, you know.
Yeah, that's good. Ryan, you said something. It was great. Like, you were talking about how your schedule, you know, sometimes our schedule can define, are we putting God first? I think that's just practical things for me. It's like, you know, our schedule can take so much precedence over stuff, but it is those little moments at the family dinner table, or, just little moments that you have with your family. Like, man, I'm putting my family first. I'm putting God first. I'm having these moments. So for me, when I get so down on myself, like, I did this for too long. I didn't put, whatever it is first that I needed to be in first priority. It's like, just to check, like, no, I really am. Yeah. I'm doing good. Yeah. Or I'm trying my best to do good.
What breaks my heart for Covenant Church is the amount of people that don't have Christian parents.
Yeah.
They don't have a picture.
Yeah.
They will listen to the messages in this series and go, I wish. I don't, my dad never did that. Yeah. I've never seen my dad pray or say, I love you, or be intentional, or I grew up in not just a Christian home. I went to a Christian elementary, middle school, high school, college. I was surrounded by church. I grew up African Methodist Episcopal, Assembly of God, Word of Faith. We were always in church. We had 20 choirs at our church. We were at church every night for a different choir. It was like I was surrounded by this. So anytime I heard a message, I had a picture. Yeah. I could go, I know what that looks like. Yeah. If someone said, hey, today we're going to talk to you about servanthood leadership, you go, oh yeah, I know what that looks like. I've seen it. Right. But my best friend who grew up in a single parent home, he would be sitting in the exact same rooms going, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't get it. Yeah. Because he didn't have a picture. And so I think every family at Covenant Church has a grand opportunity this year to start something new.
Yes.
To say, hey, even if I didn't see the picture, I can be the picture. Yeah. Right. And I think that's why I'm so excited about this series.
Yeah. To be what you didn't have.
Yeah.
That's a great call.
Yeah.
And to almost know what you don't want and choose the opposite response. Yeah. I love that.